Hey guys, tonight we're heading to a town where the porch light still flickers at dusk, where the trees always seem to hush just a little too soon, and where one soda can stay chilled long after the girl who opened it was gone. You're on Emily Carter's front porch now. Wooden floorboards creaking faintly beneath you. The quiet hum of summer insects in the hedges. The sun has just dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky streaked in purples and melancholy gold. You're sitting beside a girl with neat handwriting and a soft smile, watching her finish her trigonometry homework. She's 16, sharp, and a little shy. Emily Carter has one of those faces people remember. Gentle eyes, messy ponytail, the kind of kid who always says "excuse me" in grocery store aisles. She's got a red notebook in her lap, her pen tapped against her lip, and a can of orange soda sweating beside her geometry book. Her sister, Natalie, just shouted from the kitchen window, "Want me to bring your charger?" Emily grinned and waved her off. "I'm good," she replied. Her last words, probably. You can't help but think no thunder, no scream, no shatter of glass, just the sound of a page turning. Then you blink and she's gone. The soda can stays put. The homework slides slightly in the breeze. That's it. No frantic barking dog, no slammed screen door, just an eerie pause in the air, like the night is holding its breath. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't know she's missing yet. Not for a few more minutes. Natalie comes out humming, still in fuzzy socks, expecting to tease Emily for never plugging in her laptop, but she steps onto the porch and stops cold. Her sister's soda is still fizzing, an aunt already drawn to the sugar, but the chair is empty. It's just not the kind of moment that prepares you. You check the bathroom, the backyard. Maybe she went to ask the neighbor for something. You even laugh nervously, awkwardly, as if this is just a weird game. But the feeling grows in your stomach like a rock. Heavy and still, Natalie's voice rises. She calls, then shouts, then screams, and the world begins to change. Brookhaven isn't a town that expects trauma. It's all maple trees and trick-or-treaters and librarians who still know your name. The kind of place where local history includes a town-wide power outage in '83 and the Great Bake Sale scandal of '91, a heated cinnamon bun rivalry. A missing teenager doesn't fit here. But here you are, suddenly watching the story begin. A little history snack for the night. Suburbs like Brookhaven boomed in the post-World War II era, designed as havens of peace. They promise safety, community, and perfectly mowed lawns. But even in the safest feeling towns, danger doesn't knock. It slips in sideways. Historians still argue whether the suburban dream actually fostered security or just gave us better places to hide fear. And that fear, it now lives on Emily's porch. The police arrive within the hour. They do what they always do. Take photos, ask about boyfriends, search the bushes. They don't find anything. No shoe print, no broken latch, no witnesses. It's as if she evaporated. You know that weird, outdated fact that ancient Egyptians believed spontaneous disappearance was a sign of divine punishment? No, well, they did. And tonight, it feels plausible. What makes it worse is how ordinary the night had been. No party, no argument, just homework and soda. That banality, that maddening stillness makes the mystery fester. You stare at the books left behind and try to imagine how fast someone would have had to act. You calculate the steps from porch to driveway, 20 feet. Tops, maybe 15 seconds. You remember your own porch, the half-finished school projects, the lazy evenings, and you wonder, how do we ever feel safe? In town, rumors bloom like dandelions. Someone saw a brown truck. Someone heard a dog bark at 8:07. Someone swears Emily mentioned being followed a few days ago, though that friend isn't quite sure anymore. It's gossip, but it becomes gospel quickly. The quiet townsfolk of Brookhaven begin to look sideways at one another. At school, Emily's seat stays empty. They don't replace it. There's a soft pile of letters on her locker. Someone sticks a daisy through the vent. The scent fades, but no one removes it. You start to feel the world bending slightly. Something invisible presses against the edges of everyday life. And somewhere, in the back of your mind, you think, this story is only just beginning. You stay on the porch with Natalie a little longer. She doesn't go inside right away. Instead, she stands there, bare-armed in the cold, her eyes flicking to every shadow. There's that strange, absurd moment where she still half expects Emily to come jogging back from the bushes, laughing and saying, "Got you!" But she doesn't. Of course, she doesn't. You walk beside Natalie through the neighborhood as she begins calling out softly. Then louder, the neighbor's porch lights blink on one by one, like sleepy eyes being forced open. Someone yells out, "Everything okay?" And that's when Natalie says it out loud for the first time. "My sister is gone." You call her name over and over. You check behind trees, beneath cars, in the neighbor's unlocked shed. There's nothing. The worst part is how fast it becomes real. This isn't a prank. She isn't sneaking out. You start making phone calls. Mom, Dad, a few of Emily's close friends. Within an hour, a dozen people are pacing the block with flashlights and windbreakers, calling her name into the dark. And still nothing. One quirky bit of trivia for you: fireflies don't exist west of the Rockies, except in rare, secluded spots. So what Natalie sees blinking in the distance is just porch lights reflecting off leaves. Not hope, not guidance, just circuitry. Historians still argue whether humans evolved to be better at noticing the absence of something or the presence. Tonight, you start to believe it's the absence. You don't see Emily, you don't hear her, and that void becomes enormous, larger than the trees, louder than the night. When the police return the next morning, their tone is different, sleep-deprived, more cautious. They ask questions slowly now. Has Emily ever run away before? Did she fight with anyone? Had she seemed depressed? You watch Natalie's face tighten with each question, her answers growing sharper. No, she was fine. She was here. I left for 5 minutes. The detective's notepad fills with scribbles. You can't help but glance at it, hoping to see something that makes this all make sense. But it's just lines and fragments, like the story itself. Incomplete. The school principal cancels classes for the day. It doesn't help. The students wander in clumps down the sidewalks, talking in hushed tones, as if the wind might overhear. At Emily's usual coffee shop, her name is written in chalk on the specials board, just her name and a heart. No explanation, none needed. The local news sets up outside the Carter house that evening. You watch from the living room window with Natalie, who's now curled up on the couch, arms wrapped around a pillow. She hasn't changed clothes. Her fingers tug at a frayed seam in her sweatshirt. One of the reporters tries to interview a neighbor, who bursts into tears before finishing her sentence. The truth is, you're not just watching a disappearance. You're watching the hour after, the hour no one prepares for, when the world continues to spin, but everyone in it starts walking differently, talking softer, holding coffee cups with both hands. The Carters print flyers. Emily's senior photo. Bright smile, plain font, simple words. Missing. Last seen. October 4th. Call if seen. You help tape them to stop signs, power poles, and bus shelters. A local college student creates a website. Someone else makes a hotline. The whole community swells into action. And yet, the porch remains the same. Her chair is still there. Her school books haven't moved. The soda can, by now, has gone flat. You keep thinking about the timing. How a 5-minute window could be enough to change everything. It reminds you of that fact about World War I. How the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand happened only because his driver made a wrong turn and stalled the car right in front of the assassin. One error, one missed turn, a moment that splits history. You wonder, what tiny thing happened on Emily's porch that no one saw? The first night is the hardest. Natalie refuses to sleep. The parents speak in half sentences. You lie on the floor with your jacket for a pillow, pretending not to cry when no one else is looking. And outside, the October wind picks up, rattling the porch swing. There's no body, no blood, no clue, which is both a blessing and a curse. You can't grieve what isn't confirmed, but you also can't rest. It's like being trapped between breaths. Search dogs arrive by day 3. You follow them into the woods behind the neighborhood, down into the gully where teenagers sometimes smoke after school. Nothing. No scent trail. One dog stops at the end of the street, sits down, and simply refuses to go further. The handler shrugs. It's not uncommon. He says, sometimes the trail just ends. The sheriff organizes a town hall. You sit in the back row beside Natalie. The room smells like pencil shavings and floor wax. Everyone's there. Parents, teachers, kids who don't even know Emily but now wear her photo pinned to their backpacks. The sheriff thanks everyone for coming. He uses phrases like, all leads are being pursued, and we ask for continued vigilance. But you can feel it. There's a hole in his words. No progress, no theory, except for one woman, middle-aged, soft-spoken, who stands up near the end and says quietly, this isn't the first time someone's gone missing here. Not really. The room stills. But before she can explain, her husband pulls her gently down. The sheriff clears his throat. The meeting wraps up. Outside, the wind smells like smoke. Somewhere, someone's lighting a fire. Probably just for warmth. Probably, you don't sleep well anymore. Not just because of the nightmares, though those come too, but because you find yourself listening. Listening to the wind, to the creak of the stairs, to the groan of the pipes. Every little sound now feels like it could be a sign, a clue, a whisper that means something. And when the silence stretches too long, it's worse, because silence is when your mind fills in the gaps. It's been almost a week. The porch still looks the same. People leave flowers now, ribbons, a little hand-drawn card from a kid at Emily's school that says, come home soon, with a stick figure in a pink dress. Brookhaven has changed. You see it everywhere in how people hold their keys between their fingers when walking to their cars, in how porch lights now stay on well into the day, in the way neighbors, once casually polite, now ask more direct questions. Where were you that night? Did you see anything strange? Have you checked your security camera? One historical side note, since we're all here in the dark together, during the 1600s in colonial America, missing persons were sometimes attributed to forest spirits or the devil's path, especially if the person vanished without a trace. Modern true crime documentaries often scoff at that. But you're starting to get it. Because nothing is worse than not knowing. The mind will reach for anything folklore, superstition, coincidence, just to fill the silence. Historians still argue whether unsolved disappearances affect a community more deeply than confirmed deaths. Some say it's the lingering uncertainty that changes people the way it makes every shadow a suspect. The Carters hold a candlelight vigil by the town lake. You stand with them, watching the candles flicker across the water like tiny orange ghosts. Someone reads a poem. A local singer performs a shaky version of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It's not the song that gets to you. It's the silence after, broken only by sniffles and the shuffling of feet. But hope has a strange half-life. 2 weeks after Emily vanished, the calls slow down. The flyers start curling at the edges. The hotline rings less often. Even the police seem quieter. The detective stops coming by daily. Now it's more like once a week. And every time he leaves, the Carters look a little more sunken, a little more collapsed inward, like buildings condemned but not yet torn down. Then, 1 month to the day, a fisherman finds something by the creek. It's early morning. Fog is still rising off the water like breath from a giant's lungs. The fisherman retired, local, the kind of guy who wears wool socks year-round, spots something blue snagged on a tree root. At first, he thinks it's a tarp, but as he gets closer, he sees it's a blanket, folded strangely, and when he pokes at it with the end of his fishing rod, the edge gives way to something else, something too soft, too human. The police are called. You're not there when they unwrap it. But the news spreads faster than wildfire. Emily Carter has been found. You imagine her there, in that quiet spot by the water, under branches that never knew her name. The blanket is sky blue, thin, worn in places. Her school ID is still in her hoodie pocket. Brookhaven stops breathing for a day. In the aftermath, everything intensifies. The news crews return. Crime scene tape tangles through the trees. Search teams comb the entire creekside, hoping, dreading that there might be more. You stand with Natalie at the edge of the field, both of you squinting past the barrier tape. She doesn't cry, not yet. She just says she hated cold water. And then she adds, barely above a whisper, she didn't put herself there. That's when people start needing answers, not wanting, needing. And in that void of certainty, suspicion begins to swirl. Gary Lanson enters the picture quietly, a man with too many bad stories behind him and not enough explanations. He's 45, drives a rusted van, and lives just outside of town. Everyone already knows his name. He's been whispered about for years. A theft here, a public disturbance there, one awkward encounter with a babysitter who never told her parents what happened. Nothing that stuck legally. But in a town like this, stories stick anyway. And now someone remembers seeing Gary's van near the creek 2 days before Emily was found. Someone else swears he once bought a blanket just like the one she was wrapped in. Police bring him in. His house is searched. His van, too. And there they find it. Blue fibers. Not a smoking gun, but close enough for a town this desperate for closure. One odd fact, fiber analysis has existed since the 1800s, but it wasn't until the 1970s that it became widely accepted in court. And even now, it's still debated. Historians of forensic science argue whether fiber evidence is science or just storytelling. A story in threads. But in Brookhaven, it's enough. Gary is arrested, charged with Emily's murder. He pleads not guilty. His lawyer says the fibers could have come from anywhere, but the town has already made up its mind. There's relief, not joy, just that cold, hollow relief that comes when you can finally tell your kids, the bad man's behind bars now. You attend Emily's memorial, it's quiet. Closed casket, her photo on an easel, her in a red hoodie, eyes squinting against the sun. You hear someone whisper, "At least now there's closure." But something inside you bristles. Because it doesn't feel closed, you try to feel peace. But it's not peace, it is just pause. The kind where you hold your breath, not because it's over, but because something still feels unfinished. You go back to walking past Emily's porch. The soda can is finally gone. Someone removed it, probably Natalie. But the spot where it sat, you still see the faint circle of moisture it left behind, like the ghost of something cold and quiet and fast. Gary Lanson is in jail. People sleep better, parents relax a little. Some even stop locking their back doors again. Brookhaven exhales. The news crews move on to the next tragedy. The sheriff holds a press conference. Carefully worded. "We believe we have our suspect. We hope this provides comfort to the family." You stand at the back of the crowd next to Natalie. She doesn't clap when the others do. She just stares straight ahead, as if she's trying to spot something hiding behind the cameras. A few weeks go by. The story fades into memory, archived like a newspaper in a library basement. And then 2 more girls disappear. Their names are Hannah and Lily, sisters, 14 and 12, gone from their backyard after school on a warm November afternoon. A neighbor saw them chalking hearts on the driveway. Their mother stepped inside to grab a tray of cookies. When she came back out, no chalk, no hearts, just silence. It's too similar, too eerie, too fast. And worse, Gary Lanson is still in jail. You walk the neighborhood again. Posters go up faster this time. People know the drill now. Duct tape, printer ink, scotch tape. The volunteers are more organized. Search parties grid out maps. You hold a flashlight, stomping through fields with your boots sinking into soft earth, calling names into darkness. 3 days later, a jogger finds their bodies. You don't need to hear the details to understand. It's all too familiar. The location is different downriver, farther from the original site, but the feeling is the same. Wrapped in blue, no signs of struggle, carefully placed, like someone wants you to find them, just not too quickly. The town spirals again, but this time, there's confusion mixed with the fear. Because if Gary did it, how did these girls vanish while he was locked up? The sheriff looks tired now, real tired. He speaks at another town meeting, stumbling slightly over his words. "We're pursuing all leads," he says. There may have been accomplices. You watch his jaw tighten when he says that. Even he doesn't buy it. Historians still argue whether fear spreads faster in isolated towns than in cities. Some say rural communities bond tighter during tragedy. Others say the silence of open space lets fear fester more deeply. You're just trying to make it to the end of the day without feeling like the ground might give way beneath you. The town turns on itself. Whispers get sharper. People accuse the sheriff of moving too quickly with Gary. His supporters argue he had no choice. A few parents yank their kids from school and homeschool them in makeshift living rooms filled with worry and snacks. The mayor appears on the local news and says, "We won't let terror define us," which sounds poetic and means nothing. Then something else happens. You hear it first from Natalie, her voice shaking not from fear, but from that strange electric mix of rage and relief. The fibers weren't a match. She says, you pause. What? They're similar, not identical. That's what the new lab said. The blanket fibers, Gary's van fibers, they're not the same. It takes a second to sink in, because that was the whole case. The core of it, the one thread literally that tied Gary to Emily's death. And now, you picture that phrase from every crime documentary, not a match. Turns out, the original lab used visual microscopy, an old-school method that looks at fibers under a standard light microscope. But newer testing, FTR spectroscopy, if you're feeling nerdy, shows the chemical composition isn't the same. They look alike, but they aren't related. One weird tidbit. In the 1950s, nylon fibers were used in toothbrush bristles, parachutes, and weirdly, theatrical wigs. People used to mistake murder evidence for costume scraps. That's how tricky fiber ID can be. Nothing's ever as certain as it seems under a microscope. So now, the case cracks open again. Gary's public defender requests a full review. The DA stalls. People don't want to admit the town may have locked up the wrong man while the real killer kept hunting. But the news leaks anyway. And suddenly, that quiet chill you felt in your bones since Emily vanished, it's back. Colder this time, sharper. You walk past the Carter home. Natalie sits on the porch now, like Emily used to, only she's not doing homework. She's staring at the street, headphones in, not listening to music, just white noise. She says it helps her sleep. You ask her if she thinks Gary did it. No, she says without hesitation. I think someone wanted us to think he did, and they're not done. That's when everything changes again, not with another body, but with a girl who survives. Her name is Clara Jennings. She's 15. Lives a few streets over from the Carters. One night in December, she walks her best friend to the edge of the driveway, waves goodbye, turns to head home and vanishes. Just like that. Except this time, it's not the end of the story. Not yet. Clara Jennings doesn't come home that night, but unlike the others, she doesn't vanish without a trace. No, she leaves behind something different, something alive. Her best friend, Ava, swears she watched Clara walk halfway down the driveway, saw her turn to wave one last time, even saw her pause like she heard something. Ava blinked, and then Clara was just gone. No scream, no struggle, just absence again. That now familiar silence. But Clara, she's different. You don't see her in those first hours, but she's not far. Somewhere, in the dark belly of a moving vehicle, she's curled inside a crate, not a metaphor. An actual crate. Wooden, rough, too small to sit up in, too narrow to stretch, bound at the ankles, wrists taped, but her eyes wide open, observing. She doesn't panic, not yet, maybe not at all. Instead, she does something no one expects. She starts paying attention. First, she catalogs every sound, a muffled engine, the rattle of something metal, a scratchy radio playing old country songs, and then his voice. Just a murmur at first. Maybe he's humming, maybe he's talking to himself, but Clara listens. Every syllable, every hesitation. Back at home, Ava's parents call Clara's house. Within the hour, the police are involved. You're out again, another late-night search. This time, the energy feels different, urgent, yes, but also tinged with fury. 3 girls already lost. Clara can't be next. You walk past the riverbank where Emily was found, past the stretch of road where Hannah and Lily's chalk hearts faded into the pavement. Every landmark now feels like part of a crime scene. But meanwhile, Clara is not braking. She counts the bumps in the road, times the pauses. When the vehicle stops, she hears footsteps, a door creak, the sound of a refrigerator opening, a faint whiff of something floral shampoo, maybe. Then, the lid of the crate opens. He's wearing gloves. You don't see his face, not yet. Neither does Clara, but she takes him in all the same. His posture, the way he moves, the slight limp in his left foot. He feeds her something, water in a plastic cup, then tapes her mouth again and closes the lid. And still, she watches, remembers. You learn later she kept her eyes half shut, pretending to be disoriented, while secretly scanning the room through the slats in the crate. She saw a dentist's appointment card stuck to the fridge. She memorized the name. There was a calendar with fishing dates, a keychain with a number stamped on the side, possibly a cereal. She logged them all in order, repeated them in her head like a song. Dr. Langston, March 12th, fishhook magnet, 784 for 281. One mainstream historical note for your brain tonight: the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit wasn't formally created until 1972, and it was partially inspired by cases just like this where victims noticed things the police missed. Clara might not know that, but she is doing what they now teach agents: observe, survive. Remember, historians still argue whether true crime fascination helps or harms public understanding of justice. Does watching crime documentaries actually prepare people like Clara, or just give us the illusion of safety? Either way, Clara is now playing a part she never auditioned for. Survivor. You don't find her on day 1 or day 2, but Clara is waiting, conserving her energy. Testing the routine. She counts the time between footsteps, measures how long he sleeps, notices he forgets to double lock the door on his way out. On the 3rd night, she feels ready, and when he sleeps deeply, finally, Clara moves. She shimmies her wrist enough to reach the edge of the crate. She remembers how the lid creaked when he opened it. She moves slower, no noise. Her heart is a drumbeat, but her hands are steady. When the lid gives, she slips out. Gag still in place, but she finds a pen, uses the clip to scrape the duct tape off. It hurts. She doesn't cry. The door is ajar. She steps out, barefoot. Her legs wobble. Her lips are cracked. But she doesn't stop. She takes one look around the apartment long enough to memorize every object and bolts. The air is freezing. The gravel cuts her feet, but she doesn't slow. There's a road ahead. Headlights, a truck. She runs straight into the path, waving both arms. The driver brakes so hard his tires scream, and that's how Clara Jennings survives. The driver wraps her in his jacket, dials 911, and speaks calmly, too calmly, while Clara whispers everything she knows. She doesn't just describe the man, she gives details: the fridge, the shampoo scent, the dent in the couch, the brand of cereal on the table, and the blue fibers she felt on the blanket used to keep her comfortable. As he put it, back in Brookhaven, when the news breaks, you don't breathe for a few seconds, then you cry. Not out of sadness, out of sheer, boiling relief. Clara is alive, and she remembers everything. You don't need to be told twice. Clara Jennings is the reason everything cracks open. She's taken to the hospital first dehydrated, bruised, exhausted but not broken. And once the IV is in and the nurse steps away, Clara sits up straighter than anyone expects and says, "I need to speak to someone who listens." You admire that. She doesn't ask. She instructs. You sit in the corner as detectives lean forward, pens ready. She tells them everything. Calmly, clearly, no tears, no dramatics, just detail. The fridge magnet, the shampoo brand Pine Clean, citrus blend, the make of the crate numbers etched on the side. She even sketches the room layout, noting where the outlet was, how many steps to the door. The detectives exchange glances. One pulls out a tablet and starts running searches. You lean in, holding your breath as the puzzle starts to shift into place. One search: Dr. Langston, Oregon dentist. Pings a match. Not many of those around. A Langston Family Dental happens to share a parking lot with a small apartment complex 3 towns over. The officers drive out within the hour, and what they find, it's all there. The blue blanket, the crate, the Pine Clean shampoo, the keychain, the fishing calendar, a photograph of Emily Carter tucked into a drawer, 2 more of Hannah and Lily taped to the underside of a desk. Chilling, intentional, obsessive. But Marcus Hale, he's not there. You study the photo they release later. He doesn't look like a monster. Of course not. He looks mild, average, early 40s, clean cut, a former soldier. Someone says, worked odd jobs, lived alone. One of those men you never really notice, except when you're wondering who actually returns their library books on time. Brookhaven stares at the photo and realizes something awful. He lived among us the whole time. One strange tidbit you learn. In ancient Roman law, someone who lived a double life, such as a soldier also practicing black magic, was referred to as duplex persona, literally a twofold soul. The term faded out centuries ago, but it feels weirdly fitting here. Because Marcus Hale, he was 2 people, and only one of them left witnesses. Historians still argue whether people like Marcus are born or made. Was he always capable of this, or did something switch in him over time? Psychologists bicker about it on podcasts, but right now, in this room, with Clara, it doesn't matter. What matters is, he's out there, and he knows she escaped. You don't sleep for 2 nights after that. The manhunt begins. Every news station splashes his face across the screen. Every state trooper gets an alert. His phone's off. His car is missing. Some believe he's fled to Canada. Others think he's deep in the woods, waiting. The people of Brookhaven retreat indoors. Kids don't ride their bikes anymore. Joggers stay off the trails. You walk past windows and see TV glow behind every curtain. And Clara, she's moved somewhere safe, protected, but not silent. She agrees to a short interview not on camera, just voice. The journalist asks gently, "How did you know what to do?" Clara replies, "I figured I might not get another chance. So I watched, and I waited." Then she adds something that stays with you. "He wanted me quiet, so I made sure to remember everything loud." Eventually, they track Hale to Arizona. It's a tip from a gas station clerk. He recognizes the photo, says the man bought jerky and didn't make eye contact, paid in cash, drove a silver hatchback. When the clerk saw the Amber Alert bulletin later that night, he made the call. By the time officers find the car parked outside a remote motel, it's too late. Marcus Hale is dead inside the room. Suicide. Quiet, clean. One empty bottle, one note. Barely legible. "I was trying to stop." You sit with that phrase for a long time. "I was trying to stop," as if that counts for anything. You wonder what he meant. Was he trying to stop the killings? Or stop himself from disappearing again? Did he know Clara would survive? Did he want her to? Questions pile up like fallen leaves. You try to rake through them, but the wind keeps shifting. At the press conference, the sheriff looks more human than he ever has. He doesn't gloat. He doesn't celebrate. He just says, "We're grateful, and we owe Clara everything." And it's true. Because without her, Brookhaven would still be sleepwalking, still blaming the wrong man, still believing the monster was already locked up. Instead, Clara pulled the mask off. You visit her one day. She's quieter now, not afraid, just older, like someone who's walked through a tunnel and come out changed. She offers you lemonade and a smile. You ask if she's okay. She shrugs. "I don't think anyone ever is, but I know I'm here, and they're not." You nod. It's enough. You'd think the story would end there with Marcus Hale dead, Clara safe, and Brookhaven slowly returning to normal. But healing isn't a movie montage. It's not a fade to black with soft piano music. It's slow, clumsy, uneven, like learning to walk again after the ground betrayed you. The town feels suspended, as if the fog that once hung in the trees has settled inside everyone's lungs. You walk past the elementary school Hannah and Lily's. Their desks are still there, their art projects still thumbtacked to the walls. The teacher didn't take them down. She couldn't. You see the names written in crayon, and the scrawled hearts with lopsided wings. You realize grief leaves fingerprints on everything. Meanwhile, Gary Lanson is still in jail. It almost feels surreal now, like an unfinished joke. People whisper about it more than talk, because no one knows what to say. He wasn't a good man, sure, but he wasn't this. And now, with Marcus dead and the real killer unmasked, the town's attention turns quietly back to Gary. A new forensic team is brought in. You attend the court hearing where his lawyer presents the updated fiber report, the one confirming that the blue fibers in Gary's van didn't chemically match those on the blanket found with Emily. The judge frowns. The DA doesn't speak. The next week, Gary walks free. No parade, no apology, just a man with sunken eyes stepping back into the world with nothing but a plastic bag of his belongings and a community that doesn't quite know what to do with him. Some people still cross the street when they see him. Others drop groceries at his door. You spot him once near the library sitting on a bench, feeding squirrels like he's part of a forgotten fable. You wonder what his story sounds like inside his own head. Here's a strange historical fact for your insomnia tonight. In 1894, a Frenchman named Alfred Dreyfus was falsely accused of treason, largely because of bad handwriting analysis. The whole country turned against him, and it took years and a second trial for the truth to come out. Historians still argue whether society ever fully recovers from condemning the wrong person. Brookhaven tries. A new neighborhood watch program is formed. Porch cameras go up on every other house. Parents walk their kids to school, even the teenagers who roll their eyes the whole way there. It's not safety, it's ritual. A new religion of routines meant to convince everyone that what happened was rare, that it won't happen again. You go with Natalie to place flowers by the creek where Emily was found. The water is low this time of year, revealing smooth stones that glint like bone in the light. She kneels, arranging the bouquet with the kind of care you only see in someone who's practiced grief. She would have hated the attention, Natalie says, but she'd be glad they believed me in the end. You nod. The wind picks up, brushing her hair into her eyes. She doesn't move it. The memorial for Hannah and Lily is held in the school gym. There are folding chairs, purple streamers, and a slideshow of photos set to a pop song you once found annoying, but now can't hear without blinking too hard. Their mom speaks softly, so softly that the mic barely catches her words. They were bright, she says, not just smart. They made the air feel lighter. The gym stays silent for a full minute afterward. Not out of planning, just because no one dares to be the first to clap. You find Clara again at the vigil. She stands at the back, hoodie up, hands tucked into her sleeves. People nod at her now. Some stare. She doesn't flinch. You ask her how she's doing. She shrugs, then says, "Better than I should be." You talk for a bit. She tells you about a dream she keeps having. One where she's walking through the apartment again, but everything's covered in mirrors. No matter where she looks, it's just her, watching herself watch him. You don't say anything. You just stay beside her until she stops looking past you. Another quirky tidbit for your collection. During the Cold War, spies were trained to remember details under stress using something called the method of Loki. Placing memories inside a mental map of a familiar building. Clara didn't know the term, but she did it anyway. Built a map, memorized her way out. Historians still debate whether survival is a skill or a personality trait, whether some people just have the instinct to endure. But standing next to Clara, you realize something else. It's not about instinct, it's about decision. She decided to live. You walk home that night feeling both haunted and relieved. The killer is gone, the truth is out, but Brookhaven is not the same. Maybe it never was. You wake one morning and realize something strange. The birds are singing again. For months, it felt like they'd vanished. Silenced by sirens, search dogs, and whispered rumors. But now, their songs drift through the trees like cautious apologies. The town is slowly, tentatively tilting back toward ordinary. You visit the grocery store and spot someone laughing in aisle 4. It startles you, like a glitch in a movie, where the mood should still be gray. But no, someone is laughing. Life didn't pause after all. It just slowed down, turned inward, then began spinning again while you weren't looking. And yet, Marcus Hale's shadow lingers. His apartment is sealed off now. Windows boarded, mailbox overflowing with takeout flyers. No one wants to clean it out. No one wants to be the one to touch the couch where Clara once heard his footsteps creak past. You hear whispers that the building will be bulldozed. Start fresh. Erase him. But the truth, you can't erase someone like Marcus Hale. They find more in the apartment a few days later. A hidden crawl space behind the closet. Photos, clippings, meticulously organized notebooks labeled by year, with entries that chill your spine. It's clear now Emily wasn't the first girl he watched, just the first he acted on. One of the notebooks is dated 1993, 4 years before Emily. He wrote about patterns, about testing boundaries. He never used names, just nicknames, initials, sketches. But law enforcement begins reaching out to other counties. Cold cases are reopened. Missing persons flyers from small towns you've never heard of begin circulating in Brookhaven, like ghost stories. You learn something new. Marcus served overseas in the army. Honorable discharge. Some said he was quiet but helpful. Others remember him as always neat, always on time. His service record is clean, but one note in his psychological evaluation reads, tendency toward emotional detachment and adaptive mimicry. That phrase, adaptive mimicry, sticks with you. It sounds like something from a nature documentary, like the way a harmless snake mimics a venomous one to stay alive. But in Marcus's case, it's reversed. He mimicked you to hide, to hunt. Clara is the one who stops the unraveling. Not literally. Of course she's not out knocking on doors, but symbolically, emotionally. You see her one afternoon at the bookstore downtown. She's holding a copy of The Art of Memory by Francis Yates. It's dense, esoteric, the kind of book you'd expect to find in a professor's office, not in the hands of a 15-year-old girl with trauma under her hoodie sleeves. You ask if it's for school. No, she says, it's for me. I wanted to understand how remembering works, how it doesn't break you. You sit on the steps out front, sipping coffees. She's quieter now, but not closed. There's a difference. She tells you how she started writing things down, not just what happened, but what didn't. The dreams, the gaps, the places where memory goes fuzzy like a bad radio station. And here's a curveball historical nugget. In the 19th century, some doctors believed that violent memory could be extracted through hypnosis. They thought trauma was like a splinter lodged in the brain. All you had to do was tug gently until it came free. Historians now mostly agree that theory was bunk. Memory doesn't behave. It isn't linear. It loops, twists, disguises itself as a feeling, a smell, a sound you can't place. Clara understands that better than anyone. She invites you to her therapy group one evening. You sit in the back, listening. Another girl speaks first. She talks about the sound of duct tape, how it makes her flinch even when someone wraps a present. A boy shares that he sometimes sleeps in the closet. It feels safer, like fewer angles to worry about. Clara listens, and when it's her turn, she says something that makes everyone go quiet. I didn't survive because I was brave. I survived because I paid attention, and because I didn't want to die thinking he'd won. The room stays silent for a long time after that. You walk home in the dark. No flashlight. No keys clutched between your fingers. Just the night air, crisp and heavy with pine. You pause at Emily's porch. The chair is gone now, but the porch light is on. Natalie must have left it that way. And for the first time in a long while, you realize you're not scared. You're tired. Sure, still sad, but not scared. Because Marcus Hale is gone. Because Clara is still standing. Because memory, however crooked, still leads you home. The seasons shift. Brookhaven sheds its autumn leaves like a sigh and slips into the soft hush of winter. Snow comes late, drifting down in powdery hushes that blanket the rooftops and tuck themselves into quiet corners. But under that snow, beneath every flake, you know there are stories still settling into place. The town tries to move on, the way people always do when the headlines fade. But if you know where to look, you can still see the tension, the little cracks that haven't quite healed. You visit the high school one morning just to drop something off and catch a glimpse of the new student safety protocols, ID badges, monitored entries, check-in stations at every hall. You remember a time when kids snuck out the side doors and no one cared. Now, there's a security officer who looks like he's never blinked in his life. And Clara, she started giving talks. Not big TED Talks or anything flashy, just quiet sessions at schools and community centers. You sit in the back row of one at a church rec hall. She steps onto the makeshift stage, wearing jeans, a cardigan, and sneakers still crusted with dry mud from somewhere you don't ask about. She starts simple. I didn't want to be remembered for what happened. I wanted to be remembered for what I did with what happened. Then she talks about choices, not big ones, little ones. Choosing to breathe, choosing to listen, choosing to notice. One teacher wipes her eyes before the halfway mark. A boy in the front row, maybe 11, asks if monsters are real. Clara doesn't flinch. She says, sometimes they are, but so are people who stop them. You realize something then. Clara's not just telling her story. She's building something, turning the wreckage into scaffolding for others to climb out of. Here's an odd historical nugget for your midnight brain. In the 17th century, there was a belief that trauma could leave an imprint on walls and floors, a kind of psychic fingerprint that seeped into the structure itself. People claimed certain rooms remembered screams. Historians still argue whether this was superstition or early intuition, our way of understanding how places hold emotion. You think about Marcus Hale's apartment. You wonder if that space will ever forget. But maybe that's not the point, because Clara didn't stay in that space. She stepped out, and now she brings others with her. You meet Natalie for coffee one snowy afternoon. She's changed. Not dramatically, just softened around the edges. Her laugh comes easier now. She started taking night classes in child psychology. Says she wants to work with kids who've been through trauma. You don't have to fix them. She says, just be the first person who doesn't flinch when they talk. You sip your coffee. watching snow collect in the corners of the cafe windows, and think Brookhaven didn't go back to normal. But maybe it found something better. Clara publishes an essay in a national magazine. You read it slowly, like every word deserves time to breathe. The title is The Box I Lived In. In it, she describes not just the crate, but the mental one she carried long after, the invisible lid, the latches, the days she nearly locked herself inside it just to feel safe. But then she writes, I learned to open the lid, not all at once, but enough to let the air in. It becomes a line people repeat, print on bracelets, scrawl in yearbooks, whisper at candlelight vigils. You attend one such vigil on the anniversary of Emily's disappearance. The wind is sharp, slicing through jackets like a whispered warning. People gather near the creek where she was found. The sheriff, older now, quieter, says a few words. Natalie lights the first candle, then Clara, then a dozen others. You stare at the flickering flames and think about something odd. In Icelandic folklore, there's a belief that candles reveal truths, that if you hold one near a mirror at midnight, it shows you what's hiding. You don't know if that's true, but tonight, the candlelight does show something, not ghosts, not guilt, but grace, the kind that only comes after surviving something you never should have had to. Later that night, you walk home alone. Snow crunches beneath your boots. The sky is so clear, it feels like you could fall into it. You pass the houses where porch lights still glow. You pass the school, the park. The path behind Clara's house, now lit with motion-sensitive lights someone finally installed. The darkness still exists. Of course it does. But now it's punctuated, pierced by motion and memory, and a girl who refused to stay in the box. You stop by Emily's porch. It's quiet. There's no chair anymore. No soda can. Just a single daffodil poking through the snow. You wonder who left it. Then you keep walking. The thaw begins slowly. Brookhaven softens under the late March sun. And all around you, things start to wake up. Lawnmowers clearing their throats, kids wobbling down sidewalks on bikes with plastic streamers, the smell of damp earth rising from flower beds. You stand at the edge of the creek where Emily was found, and it no longer feels like a crime scene. It feels like a place that knows pain but refuses to rot in it. The town paints over the scars, not to forget but to reclaim. The elementary school installs a mural on its front wall. Two swans on a river, surrounded by stars. Hannah and Lily's classmates helped paint it. You spot their brushstrokes, uneven, joyful, imperfect. Clara visits the mural one morning before school starts. She stands in front of it for a long time. Then she touches one of the stars, just for a second, and walks away. Natalie, meanwhile, has become the town's quiet activist. She doesn't shout or stage protests, but she knows how to organize. She holds a community safety meeting at the library's standing room only. Parents sit in folding chairs with notepads. Teachers nod in the back, and the sheriff, now aging into a mustache-gray version of himself, sits near the door, taking it all in. Natalie shares stats, preventative strategies, but she also shares stories, not to scare, but to remind. You learn something odd during that meeting. The phrase safe neighborhood was coined during 1970s American suburban planning, not as a crime term, but as a marketing slogan for real estate brochures. Historians still argue whether the illusion of safety was more harmful than the actual risks, because it lulled people into letting their guard down. Brookhaven believed it was safe. Now, it knows how to be watchful instead. There's one moment that sticks with you from that night. A father in the crowd raises his hand and asks, "How do we tell our kids the truth without terrifying them?" Natalie pauses, then says, "You tell them they are strong and loved, and that monsters don't win when we look out for each other." You glance at Clara then, sitting in the front row. She doesn't react, but there's a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. You walk her home afterward. The moon is full, the path quiet. She doesn't need an escort anymore. She says she's okay walking alone. But you still walk with her, not because she needs you, but because you want to. She tells you something new that night, about the crate, not about the fear, about the silence. It wasn't empty in there, she says. It was filled with everything I remembered. That was how I stayed alive. I didn't think about dying. I thought about how to testify. You look at her and realize you're walking beside someone who changed the story. Here's a lesser-known and historical gem for you. In ancient Greek courts, silence wasn't allowed. Everyone Even the accused was expected to speak because speech was tied to honor. The idea that silence could be a virtue only came much later, and even then, it was often for the wrong reasons. But Clara, she chose her silence wisely, and then she chose when to break it. The town decides to rename the community center after the girls, the Carter Jennings Center for Resilience. It sounds heavy at first, like a name too big for such a small building. But when you walk through the doors and see what it holds, counseling rooms, study groups, a mural wall, and a box of crayons for drawing whatever you need to written in Sharpie, it makes sense. You go there often now, to think, to breathe, to remind yourself that healing has architecture. The sheriff retires in April. His farewell interview is short. "I've made mistakes," he says, "but I've also witnessed courage I can't explain." No parade, no plaque. Just a quiet exit from a long, complicated post. Clara sends him a card. You never ask what it said. Marcus Hale's name disappears from news cycles. No new victims are confirmed, though other counties continue to dig. The case becomes a cold ember, a file folder that will sit in boxes long after everyone forgets where the boxes were stored. And you keep walking. Some days, you still look over your shoulder. That's okay. Safety isn't about never being afraid again. It's about knowing what to do with the fear. You find Natalie painting again. Something abstract. Sharp lines in charcoal and cream. You ask what it is. She says, "The shape of noise when it suddenly stops." You understand, the porch where Emily disappeared now holds a bench swing. It creaks in the wind, always slightly tilted. You sit there once with a coffee and let the breeze move you. It doesn't hurt the way it used to. It just feels like history present, but no longer choking. Because Emily's story didn't end on the porch, and Clara's didn't end in the crate. They just changed chapters. Time. That slippery trickster does what it always does, it passes. And Brookhaven, while still carrying its bruises, starts to wear them differently, like old tattoos, not hidden, not flaunted, just part of the skin now. You start noticing the quieter things, like how the creek doesn't seem as cold anymore, how the benches are full again. Old men with newspapers, teenagers with earbuds, someone's golden retriever napping in the shade. You see Clara once, reading a paperback with a cracked spine, her feet dangling over the dock. A mosquito lands on her wrist. She doesn't swat it, just watches it, then brushes it away. You remember the kid in school who once said trauma makes you hyper-aware of everything. You didn't believe it then. You do now. One odd fact for your collection. In medieval France, it was believed that bells could drive away evil spirits not just symbolically, but literally. Towns had special bell ringers for times of panic. They didn't always stop the plague, but they gave people something to hold on to. Clara, she became Brookhaven's bell. Not loud, just steady. You hear she's joined the school's debate team. This surprises no one. She never shouts, but when she speaks, the room leans forward. During one match, she argues in favor of truth as resistance. Her closing line, "If you remember it, they don't get to rewrite it." That becomes her motto. They print it on posters at the new community library wing. Natalie applies for grad school. She doesn't mention it at first, just casually leaves a catalog on the table, but you find her editing essays one day at the cafe. Her personal statement includes a quote from her sister. "People aren't puzzles, they're stories. You don't solve them. You listen." You're proud of her in that quiet, hard-to-describe way, like watching someone rebuild a house without a single complaint. Brick by thoughtful brick. Marcus Hale's name still pops up in the odd true crime podcast, but the focus has shifted. Now it's about how Clara remembered, how she endured, how she defied the script that people like him try to write for others. You think about that a lot, how monsters often try to make other people the setting, the scenery. Clara refused. She became the protagonist in her own horror story, and then rewrote the ending. You find one of her notebooks by accident, left behind on a library desk. It's filled with lists, brands, smells, voices, memories. Some are fragments. One just says ceiling fan plus peppermint. Another, left-handed, always hummed off-key. It's forensic poetry, memory as architecture, survival as authorship. You leave it untouched. She knows exactly where she left it. Historians still argue whether trauma can ever truly be healed. Some say no, that it lives in the nervous system forever. Others argue it can be transformed like heat, changing coal into a diamond. You think about Clara and figure the answer is probably both. The pain remains, but so does the brilliance that came from it. One rainy Saturday, you visit the community center. The back wall now holds a photo exhibit. Resilience in portraits. Clara's is last in the row. She's looking straight into the lens expression, neutral, but her eyes say everything. Below it is a short quote. He wanted me to be quiet, so I made sure to be loud, just not in the way he'd understand. You realize something? Brookhaven didn't just survive Marcus Hale. It redefined itself because of Clara Jennings. You spend more time outside now, less time looking over your shoulder, more time noticing ordinary things. The smell of sunscreen in July, the stickiness of grape popsicles, the satisfying crunch of fresh gravel underfoot. And somewhere along the way, you start dreaming less about the past and more about the future. Emily's bench is still there. Someone added a plaque, in memory of the light that never left us. One night, you sit there alone. No fanfare, no cameras, just wind and frogs and distant laughter from a backyard cookout. You think of all the things that could have gone differently if Ava hadn't seen Clara wave goodbye, if Clara hadn't waited, if the truck driver had chosen another road. But that's the thing with stories. They hinge on slivers, moments, and yet, those moments can save entire lives. Summer arrives quietly. And without apology, the trees are full again, the air thick with pollen and grilling smoke, and Brookhaven hums not with fear, but with ordinary noise. Lawn sprinklers, kids yelling "watch me" from bike ramps, that one dog on Elm Street who still hasn't learned that the mailman is not, in fact, a threat to society. It's in this warmth that you begin to realize something. There's no going back to before, and maybe that's okay. You visit Clara at her house on a Sunday afternoon. Her mom is outside repotting herbs, humming to herself. Clara waves you up to the porch. She's drawing something abstract, scribbly, full of lines and hidden circles. She says it helps her sort thoughts that don't want to become words yet. You sit next to her, feeling the wood warm under your legs. She asks, "Do you remember the day they found Emily?" You nod. "Of course you do. I was playing a video game," she says. And when the news alert came on the screen, I just stared at it. Not scared, not sad, just cold. I didn't know her, but I knew what it meant. You wait. Let the silence stretch. Then she adds, "I think that was the moment I started noticing things." It clicks. Clara didn't become a hero when she escaped. She started long before that when she chose to become an observer, a collector of fragments, a cartographer of unease. You bring her a book from the library, an old psychology text, bookmarked with a sticky note. Locus of control. She reads the highlighted section. People with an internal locus believe they can influence their fate. Clara taps the page. That's it. That's what made the difference. She's not wrong. Most people flinch and freeze. Clara cataloged and waited, like a chess player planning 5 moves ahead in complete darkness. One strange fact you learned this week. In World War II, POWs who maintained routines shaving, writing, folding their clothes were statistically more likely to survive. Not because of hygiene, because of control. Even small rituals built structure in chaos. Clara, she found rituals in memory. Historians still debate whether remembering too much is harmful. Some say obsessive recall feeds trauma. Others argue it's the only way to name it, and by naming it, shrink its power. You're not sure which is true, but you know that forgetting never helped anyone escape a locked box. The town council votes to add an annual event, Light Night, a celebration of memory and resilience. It's held near the river, under hanging lanterns. People float paper boats down the water with little tea lights inside. No names, no speeches, just light and movement. Clara designs the logo, a small hand holding a match. You stand at the banks with Natalie. She lights her candle with shaking fingers and says softly, "I never thought I'd feel joy again without guilt." You don't say anything. You don't have to. A few days later, you walk past Gary Lanson's house. It's quiet, curtains drawn, the yard overgrown. He doesn't talk much these days, but he attends Clara's talks, sits in the back row, always claps once, very softly. You don't know if it's remorse or reflection, maybe both. Clara's story makes the regional papers, then a national podcast, then, quietly, the early stages of a documentary. She agrees to be interviewed on her terms. No dramatization, no over soundtrack, just her voice, low and steady, describing what it's like to notice the world without flinching. The interviewer asks her, "Do you think justice was done?" Clara says, "Justice is what we do after the worst thing happens." And there it is. Justice isn't a verdict, it's a verb. You think about Marcus Hale sometimes, not often, but when the weather shifts or when a certain song plays, you imagine what he thought in those final hours. Whether he realized he'd been defeated not by handcuffs or sirens, but by a barefoot girl with a memory like iron. No monuments are built for him. There's no plaque, no documentary about his past. Just a single cold caseboard still pinned to a basement wall in another town, where a detective connects threads with a thumbtack and sighs. And Clara, she's moving forward. Not moving on, there's a difference. She starts writing a book, not a memoir, a guide. You read the first draft, it's part story, part workbook. The subtitle is How to Build a Map Out of the Dark. She dedicates it to those who remember, especially when it hurts. You start to notice how Clara's presence changes a room. Not just when she speaks, though. That's its own quiet power, but even before. People shift when she walks in, like chairs pulling into formation, not out of fear or reverence, but readiness. She's become a kind of compass. She doesn't ask for it, she never wanted it. But the town has decided. She points toward true north. You sit in on a high school workshop she runs called Mapping the Unseen. It's not just about trauma, it's about how to notice things you've been trained to overlook. A flicker in someone's voice, the weight of silence, the patterns we ignore because they're uncomfortable. She starts by passing out blank sheets of paper. Draw your route to school, she says. The students stare, then sketch. Then she says, now draw the things you never look at on that route. You can feel the atmosphere shift. One girl draws a gas station, another, a neighbor's porch light that never turns off. One boy hesitates, then draws a dog that barks at exactly 7:12 a.m. each day. That's what kept me alive, Clara says. Details that no one else cared about. It's brilliant, simple, and deeply profound. You think about how easily the world overlooks people like her. Quiet girls, bookish boys, kids who sit in the back and doodle maps instead of taking notes. But those are often the ones who see everything, remember everything. One strange piece of trivia. In World War I, silent scouts were trained to read terrain not just by sight, but by sound. They'd lie for hours in ditches, noting distant vibrations. Entire missions depended on people who could tell the difference between a rabbit rustle and a boot step. Clara would have made a phenomenal scout. Historians still argue whether trauma breeds perception or whether perception makes people more susceptible to trauma. Does the ability to notice keep you safe, or does it make everything feel sharper, more dangerous? Clara doesn't bother with that debate. She just uses her perception like a toolkit. Never flashy, just effective. You meet her one evening at the Carter Jennings Center. She's organizing a new project, a memory garden. Not statues, not plaques, just plants each representing a person, an emotion, a moment. You help her plant daffodils for Emily, marigolds for Hannah, lavender for Lily, and rosemary for Clara herself because, as she reminds you, rosemary is for remembrance. You catch her humming while she works, a soft, tuneless thing. It takes you a moment to realize it's the song that was playing on the radio when she escaped. She tells you later that she keeps it with her on purpose. It doesn't own me, she says. I own it now. The mayor visits the garden. So does the school superintendent. Eventually, a journalist from the Oregonian stops by to write a piece. You're there when she interviews Clara beneath the hanging wind chimes. Someone donated? What would you say to the man who did this? The journalist asks. Gently, Clara doesn't blink. Nothing. I'm not interested in letting him rent space in my mouth. The quote goes viral. People start repeating it, printing it on pins. You spot one in Portland a week later. There's a power in that. A line drawn firmly between surviving and centering the harm. One afternoon, Natalie shows you a box of Emily's things. Not much. A few notebooks, a mixtape, a photo strip from a county fair. The last page of one journal reads, I want to matter in ways that last. You sit with that sentence for a long time, because she does matter. Through Clara, through Natalie, through the garden and the porch light and the stories that don't end with her scream, but begin with her absence. You think of Marcus Hale only once more. when a letter arrives, months later, postmarked before his death, addressed to whom it may concern. Inside is a folded page that reads, "I'm sorry I couldn't stop myself. I hope someone else can." You don't show it to Clara. You don't need to. She's already done more than he ever could. Brookhaven holds its second light night in the fall. This time, the crowd doubles. Lanterns drift farther. Candles stay lit longer. You stand beside Clara as the sky deepens to violet. The water glows gold. She turns to you and says, "You know what I realized?" "What?" "This isn't about surviving him anymore. It's about surviving with myself." You nod. "That's all you can do." And when the last lantern slips past the bend in the creek, she whispers, "We're still here." You walk through Brookhaven these days and notice something remarkable. There's laughter again. Genuine, unguarded laughter. The kind that bubbles up in grocery aisles, at bus stops, in parking lots. It's not that people have forgotten. It's that they've made room for joy beside the remembering. You stop by the Carter Jennings Center one morning and find Clara leading a workshop on, of all things, creative writing. Not survival, not crisis planning, not resilience coaching, just storytelling. You ask her why. "Because I want to give people a way to write themselves outside the worst thing that ever happened to them." She says, "Survival stories are great, but I want to help people write afterward." It's brilliant, and honestly, a little disarming. Most people cling to the moment they were brave. Clara insists on being something beyond that moment. She won't let herself be frozen in amber. One quirky fact: the ancient Greeks believed that the soul had 5 parts, and one of them, eudaimonia, meant human flourishing. Not just surviving or being moral, but living well after hardship. Flourishing was a spiritual responsibility. Clara lives like she knows that instinctively. Historians still debate what post-traumatic growth really is. Is it measurable? Is it just a coping illusion? A fancy way to say silver lining? Clara doesn't argue it either way. She just shows up. She teaches. She laughs more now. You join her and Natalie for dinner at the Carter house one evening. It's casual pasta, salad, mismatched plates. Natalie teases Clara for overcooking the noodles. Clara rolls her eyes but grins anyway. There's a photograph on the mantle. Emily, mid-laugh, holding a sparkler. You hadn't noticed it before. Natalie catches you looking and says she hated sparklers, said they smelled like burnt toast, but she always pretended to like them for my birthday. You all laugh, softly, together. And in that moment, you realize that the story of Brookhaven has stopped being a horror story. It's become a survival tapestry stitched together from girlhood, grief, memory, and extraordinary attention. Clara's book gets picked up by a publisher, not a big one, just a thoughtful imprint that sees the value in her voice. The cover is simple, a hand-drawn map of a box, with an arrow pointing out. The title, "The Exit is Real." She asks you to read the dedication before it goes to print. It says, "For those who are still inside the box, you are not alone. Memorize everything. Wait. When it opens, run." You close the book and feel the weight of every name that never got to write a page. Emily, Hannah, Lily. At the launch event, Clara doesn't read a passage. She lets others do it. Teachers, librarians, even Ava, her childhood best friend, who's found her voice again in quiet poetry and firefly tattoos. Clara just watches from the side, calm, grounded, unshakable. Afterward, someone asks if she ever fears being remembered only for what happened. Clara shakes her head. "If I'm remembered at all, I hope it's for what I noticed." That's when you remember something from way back, a line from an old psychology textbook. Awareness, when cultivated, becomes its own kind of armor. Brookhaven still carries scars, sure, but they're no longer warnings. They are markers, coordinates, reminders of where not to step again, and of the paths that were built by people who refuse to disappear quietly. You visit the memory garden before heading home. The rosemary is tall now. Bees drift lazily through the lavender. The wind carries the scent of something soft and green and stubbornly alive. You sit on the bench and close your eyes. In the distance, a train passes. Someone's dog barks. A child laughs. And for the first time, you don't brace yourself. You just breathe. The third light night arrives quietly. There's no grand announcement, no news vans, no commemorative banners, just lanterns, hundreds of them, bobbing gently along the creek's surface like thoughts you let go of after holding too long. You help Clara light hers. She crouches at the bank, shielding the flame with her hand. like she's guarding something sacred. When it catches, she releases it without ceremony. You follow suit. There are no speeches this year, just music. An old cello tune played live from a folding chair near the water. The notes are low, winding, slow. They thread through the branches and pull the stars closer somehow. Natalie finds you near the cider table. She's smiling again, really smiling. Not that polite grimace people wear at family reunions. "I'm thinking of moving," she says. "Portland. Grad school's there. I think it's time." You nod. "And the house?" "I'll rent it," she says. "Someone else deserves porch memories." You smile. But there's something bittersweet in it. The porch, that chair, that circle from the soda can, all still burned into your mind. But you get it. Some things you carry, some you pass on. A few days later, Clara stops by your place. She's holding a small box cardboard, taped once. "For you," she says. Inside is a pair of noise-canceling headphones, a notebook with the word "field guide" written in marker, and a note. In case you ever need to start noticing again. You hug her. For the first time, she hugs back without hesitation. There's a finality to everything this season. Not an ending, but a kind of settling. Like the last piece of a jigsaw puzzle that you didn't know was missing until it clicked into place. That night, you sit on your back porch, headphones on, field guide open. You write, "Today I remembered what Clara taught me. That safety isn't the absence of danger. It's the presence of awareness, memory, and the will to act. And maybe when we share that monsters stay shadows, and we, the noticers, stay free." One last historical fact. Whispered like a lullaby. In ancient Japan, kintsugi was the art of repairing broken pottery with gold. The cracks weren't hidden, they were honored. The break became part of the story, made more beautiful because of it. Brookhaven is gold-veined now. You walk through it one more time past the memory garden, the creek, the mural, everything soft, everything scarred, everything growing anyway. You stop at the Carter porch. Someone new lives there. The chair is back, not Emily's, but close. A teenager? Someone else's little sister sits on it now, reading a comic book and sipping from a soda can. You stand still for a second, then you smile, then you go. And now, as the lanterns drift farther down the creek and the wind settles its last argument with the trees, let yourself soften. The porch is empty, the shadows have thinned. The story has been told. You're safe now, not because the world is perfect, but because you've made it through something difficult. You've listened all the way to the end. That alone is its own kind of bravery. Close your eyes, picture Clara, walking barefoot out of that box, blinking into daylight. Remember how she didn't crumble, didn't run forever, didn't hide behind silence. She remembered, she named things, she grew. Now imagine Natalie's paintbrush dragging bold streaks of charcoal across a canvas. Not because it erases anything, but because it adds depth. Imagine Emily's laughter caught in a photo, frozen mid-breath, still echoing in the sway of that porch swing. Breathe in, exhale. Let your own porch light flicker gently in your mind, glowing like a lighthouse through the fog of memory. Let it warm you, not haunt you. You are not lost. You are not alone. Everything that happened in Brookhaven lives quietly now in the roots of that garden, in the pages of that book, in the flicker of a lantern on the water. And you're still here. So rest now, not because it's over, but because you finally arrived on the other side. The air is still, the box is open, the map is in your hands. Sleep well, noticer. You've earned it.